this is really important because it was just brought to my attention by some concerned parties. Jesse and Weekly Haas are apparently affiliated with a group of Mormons called Deznat. Is that accurate? I want to be sure I'm not mischaracterizing you guys. Is that true? Just nod.
Some people call me the face of Deznat.
Thank you. So I think it's really important to point out that they represent a very controversial part of Mormonism. And for some people, the part of Mormonism that I represent is also controversial. And Deznat and Mormon transhumanism are very, 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 very different in some ways. However, most of us in both of these organizations also happen to be part of the same church. And so there are commonalities as well. But I wanted to point out this distinction because I think it's very important for anybody watching this meeting to know that, and they would probably feel similarly, I'm not in any way affiliated with Deznat. And in fact, I strongly oppose many of the things that they stand for.
Oh,
He's
man.
definitely not. No,
I'll
back him up in that.
I'm not done, guys. I'm not done.
I'm going to rip up your membership card, Lincoln, okay?
That's great. I'm not done.
I'm going to refuse your membership dues.
I never had one, so don't worry about me. Okay?
And I want to make sure that people understand that I understand that Weekly Haas introduced himself by telling me a bunch of things that I believe that are false. And I've observed them doing those sorts of things on Twitter to other people. I think it's important, however, that we recognize that we're coming from different strains of Mormonism with different expressions of our values. There is some overlap that we might talk about, but there are going to be technicalities in understanding that overlap correctly that are going to confuse a lot of people, including poor Dr. Edward Hudgens. And I'm sorry about that. And I have no ill will towards Jesse or Weekly Haas. I also want to emphasize that.
Hey, be nice.
But I also want to be sure that nobody thinks that I'm affiliated with Deznat.
I honestly don't think anybody does, but just real quick.
I wouldn't be worried.
Well, they do because I just got a bunch of questions through email about it. So,
what would you say is the thing that you disagree on the most? Because I know that you're saying as far as the nature of certain things in reality, as far as whether Mormon elders are for, let's say, not even life extension, but just the way that they perceive reality. Would you say that's the key difference? No, I would suggest there's probably not as much difference in kind of understanding of core principles of the gospel. There's more a difference in how we behave in an effort to promote our religion. They behave in ways that I want to be very far distanced from. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are the ways that they behave in?
They harass people on Twitter.
Well, here's the thing about Twitter. I think Twitter is kind of, I would say Twitter is sort of made for that as well, but there's a limit for me personally as far as, like, I would say the limit is if you constantly harass somebody who's, like, blocking you and then you go on another account, like, that is harassment that I am absolutely 100% against, for the record. But when it comes to, let's say, people poking fun at somebody, memeing somebody, like, that is something that I am absolutely for. Again, like, I'm not exactly sure what you guys do as far as the level of ways that you mock people. That is my own personal stand on this, and I also would appreciate respect to Lincoln, who I'm really thankful that you're here today with us, and I really appreciate the where you're coming from. I would be much more curious as far as how you imagine the world to be, as far as, like, Jesse. You were able to speak pretty eloquently about your faith, but when it comes to something like life extension and where exactly Mormons factor in the future, I know Mormons like to prepare a lot. I know that they're probably seeing the writing on the wall as far as things are going to be kind of uneasy in the next coming years. So what would you say as far as disaster preparedness, as far as keeping communities together, what the situation there is, and also your particular thoughts on not even life extension, but let's say technology that would enable, let's say, your grandmother to live, slightly like a longer amount of time for everybody to be healthier. Like, I don't have anything against that. I would rather my parents and grandparents live for a good amount of time, and I would encourage any technology that would enable them to be happy and healthy. But let me know what you think.
All right. On the topic of disaster preparedness, the most important thing to prepare is a community. I believe the human community is an organism. It's a good organism, a wholesome organism, and is very, very resilient. And it's important for each member of that community to be prepared for eventualities, be prepared for contingencies. And the church publishes a guide to disaster preparedness, and it's very well written. I would encourage that. I don't have the link handy. As far as life extension goes, life extension happens in the Book of Mormon. It's a similar story to one in the Bible, but it's a common trope for miraculous preachers to be given extra life, and three Nephite stories are a very important part of our culture. Again, they're closely related to John the Beloved stories. Many things that are done by miracles in the scriptures are done by technology today, which is also a miracle. Life extension, I don't have a problem with it on its face, but we have life extension right now. It's not very good. We can squeeze a few more years of life out of people in suffering. And that is the trajectory I see our technology taking. We are not in an age of great technological advancement. We're in an age of decline. This has been masked to a great extent by our current energy paradigm of fossil fuels. And many aspects of our culture and our morality are based in a glut of energy over the last 200 years, rather than some kind of evolutionary progress. This idea that evolution wants things, and it's trying to exalt us and turn us into telepathic Arthur C. Clarke psychic babies or something. That's completely unscientific. Evolution makes us fit, and makes our societies fit, and makes our morality fit. And right now we are developing a society that is fit for fossil fuels, where families are deprioritized, individuals are given priority insofar as they serve the economy, many other things, and this isn't the product of human technology taking us to heaven. This isn't Promethean in any way. The Romans would have seen the same things happen to their society if they had learned how to exploit petroleum. And so, as far as life extension and other transhuman technologies, I am all for them, but I do not believe we are capable of producing anything like a heaven with them. Not at this point. Not with the kind of society that we have.
Would you also say that we are in somewhat of a fallen state because the creature comforts we currently have, like the drugs, the TV and internet watching, it's not exactly serving our favor as far as being fit enough to withstand any natural disaster that may come?
It's making us fit for the situation that we're in, which is not robust against natural disaster. We've seen that this year. The rise in suicides alone from the coronavirus, it shows that whatever other blessings we're given, we don't have the best system that we could have. And as far as the transhuman goal of making humanity immortal, Mars colonies, space colonies, I'm all for that. But for some reason, our advancement into space has slowed down over the last 50 years. So whatever's going on, it's not making us robust as a species.
Dr. Hudgens,
I have an agreement with Jesse on that, on the importance of values for the future that we all aspire to. Technology will never be enough on its own. And I think even Dr. Edward Hudgens would agree with this. We need something to complement technology. We need values that are conducive to flourishing. And where Jesse and I would probably agree is that a good way to promote that is through preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is essentially at its heart about compassion and love and charity.
I actually have probably two big issues with transhumanism as it intersects with Mormonism, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Will you please pose them as questions, just in case they're misrepresentations?
We'll see. Well,
yeah, imagine someone imagine someone giving a misrepresentation of what someone else would believe because of their affiliation with the group on this very stream like 20 minutes ago. Yeah.
But basically, yeah, so there's a few issues I have with transhumanism other than just the optics of it. You know, you kind of have to look like a weird dude to do it. But other than that, ultimately to me, there's two issues. One, I'll start with the idea that a lot of the transhumanism, now I can't speak for Lincoln because I don't know his mind. But a lot of the transhumanists are essentially looking for a scientific explanation for miracles. That's kind of the goal. And that comes from a lack of faith. That is my proposition. The idea that someone hears the story of Noah and the flood and says that's impossible. Couldn't have happened. So let's look for a scientific explanation, a historical explanation. Maybe there was this, maybe it was ancient aliens even. Even saying it's ancient aliens is showing it's a lack of faith. You don't actually believe that God could have done such a thing.
What about ancient Aryans? Sorry to interject.
What about them?
Well, I mean, what if all the ancient aliens are just ancient Aryans, and like the epitome of the ancient Aryan is Jesus Christ?
Well, I would say anything that says that the ancient people did this not through the means that were told through prophetic means, through the priesthood of God, through the power of God, that it's through some other means because it's impossible that the power of God could have been made manifest in such a way. That's showing a lack of faith. And so what eventually happens is someone who says, well, you know, I believe in Jesus, but I can't really accept the flood or young earth creationism, which I'm not a young earth creationist, but they say, you know, I can't really accept Adam and Eve's story as literal. I can't accept Jonah and the whale as real. You know, it couldn't have happened. It's impossible. Well, it's not much of a leap to then say, well, Jesus Christ could not have risen from the dead. Someone who's dead cannot be made alive again. That's impossible. And so
we can't bring my dead girlfriend back?
Yeah, you definitely can. And she will be resurrected. All men will be resurrected, all girls, all GFs, EGFs, mommy GFs, all kinds of them.
What about 2D GFs? Are they out of the question?
What about
Unfortunately,
GFs?
2D GFs have no spirits, so they can't.
Anime
I'm
cannot be
not sure if I
would raise an
Spirit.
objection to that.
Well, what about
anime
Thank you.
pillows?
What about Topaz?
No
What about
anime pillows.
What about the daimonic realm, the fairies, the jinn, as in
Dimensional merge.
exactly, Chris Chan, Sonichu.
Exactly. Well, anyway,
You didn't answer
so
my
that's
question.
what I'm saying is essentially it shows a lack of faith. It shows you don't actually believe Jesus could have raised from the dead. You don't actually believe in these stories. You don't believe they're real. Now, some of us believe they're real, 100% real. And we have faith. We believe in God. We believe he exists. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe that Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead. We believe that he suffered for everyone's sins. There's not necessarily a scientific explanation for all of this. And looking for it is somewhat against what we're supposed to do, especially if you look at the scriptures, which is the word of God. If you read in 1 Corinthians 2, it says that the things of God are foolish unto men, and they need to be discerned through the means of God. And so that means through prayer, through revelation. These things you don't need technology for. You don't need anything like that. So that's my first issue with transhumanism. I can give my other one quickly, or we can.
Well, I would love for Lincoln to answer that one, specifically that Bible verse. Lincoln, what do you make of that particular verse?
Which verse?
The last one that was said about
that the things of God are to be discerned through the ways of God. Essentially, the whole chapter of 1 Corinthians 2.
Yeah, I think that's a great passage of scripture. I don't have issues with it, but I do have issues with how it's being applied in this case. To claim that looking for explanations of things is faithless is exactly the opposite of faithlessness. If you have faith that something has happened or that something is possible, you act on it, you do something about it, you seek to understand it. Or if it's a faith in a future thing, you seek to participate in its coming to being. The whole notion that science is a lack of faith is almost anti-Mormon. You've got James Talmage, who was an apostle of the church, who wrote, was this faithless? And said that when we talk about miracles, we're not talking about contravention of natural law. We're talking about things that we just don't understand yet. and that our duty as children of God is to understand how God does what God does. That is an expression of faith. Science is an expression of faith. Are you faithless because you aren't a young earth creationist? You admitted it, that you're not a young earth creationist. Is that a lack of faith? No. It's because science has actually demonstrated that young earth creationism is a hocus pocus.
Well, let's break that down for a second. Let's break that down. So why are you not a young earth creationist? What is it in the Bible
I'm open to it.
You're okay,
I'm open to it.
But what is it in
the Bible? But the Bible
that...
itself does not support a lot of young earth creationist ideas, right? It doesn't say this is the exact date this thing happened in many cases. And also the Bible is simultaneously symbolic and literal. So if you read Isaiah, for instance, all of his prophecies actually have at least 3 applications. Every single verse in the book of Isaiah is a literal explanation of, for instance, Isaiah naming his children, Maher Shalal Hashbaz and Sher Jasub. These are names that the king is supposed to use at that day that Isaiah was alive. They also were prophecies of Jesus Christ, and they also are prophecies of the end times, the second coming. And so to say that the Bible means only one thing is not something I'm all about. I kind of tend to like all things, so I'm not totally opposed to everything that a transhumanist could come up with for an explanation of, for instance, Talmage says that when water came out of Jesus when he was poked with a spear, it was because there was some kind of coronary embolism or something that turned his blood and separated it from the plasma and the water in his blood, and that's why the water came out. So there's like explanations like that, which I'm okay with, but I don't base my faith on them.
But as far as
nobody bases their faith on it. The faith in Mormonism should be directed at Jesus Christ, the gospel that he taught, not at technical.
And so how was he resurrected? How can a transhumanist come up with a technology that can resurrect people? That's essentially
he was turned
Today,
he was turned into an anime character.
But the point of our theology.
But in 1,000 years, in 2,000 years, can someone come up with how to resurrect people technologically?
Well, Doctrine and Covenants says that God ordained before the world was.
Then why do we need Jesus Christ?
Redeem our dead.
Then Jesus Christ is not the only path. Then is that what you're claiming right now?
No,
that there's another path to resurrection that's not through Jesus Christ.
Jesus invites us to be one with him in Christ, to participate in his work, to do the things we saw him do, and yet greater things, as the Bible puts it. And that in doing those things, we're expressing our faith in Jesus Christ. By sitting on our hands and not using the means that God has given us, we're actually not expressing our faith. And as Captain
what technology do you need to exercise the priesthood of God?
Hold on. Hoss, can I tag in?
Tag in, Jesse. You're in. Big brain it up.
Okay, I'm gonna big brain it up. It's very large. You can kind of see it through here. Anyway, so I'm on board with some of the things Hoss was saying, but not entirely. And I've got something like a middle way. I have a very large brain, so I'm obviously a centrist in this discussion. Now, Joseph Smith never tried to prove the existence of God. He didn't produce a single philosophical explanation, no kind of proof, no kind of syllogism. He wasn't about that. From the very beginning, his proof for the existence of God was, I have seen God. He was a witness. Hold on a second. Many of the ways we approach God can be technological. And I don't doubt that in the future we might find ways to restore life to a dead brain if we're able to keep technology on a advancing trajectory, which turns out to be much trickier than to just give everyone a market economy and say go for it. Now, I think a big difference I've got between the other two participants in this is that I believe the Bible could be describing things, Job could be a fiction. Jonah could be a fiction. But on the other hand, maybe they were weirder. Maybe there was more strange stuff involved. Maybe the Bible is soft pedaling it for us. We've got to be open to the idea that we really don't know anything at all. Now, sorry, I didn't write down enough notes. So in opposition to Lincoln, though, we're not given technology just for existing. We're given technology sometimes for being righteous, and I'm growing more convinced that a lot of our technology is a deal with the devil. Deal with the devil, very, very, very common trope. The devil gives you a lot of wealth for a short period of time, then he comes for your soul, and he takes you to hell. Now,
like the interdimensional DMT elves. We'll get to that later.
Yes. The DMT
We're not disagreeing there, Jesse. We're on the same page. Technology is just power, good or evil.
Okay. I have a compromise. Sure. I have a compromise between the Deznats and the transhumanists. You guys can have your theocratic ethno-state, but it's got to be on Mars.
Lincoln, didn't you? No, that was Stephen L. Peck wrote a short story about that. You remember that? I was disappointed by that. He didn't really go into. He didn't know what feudalism was, man. And it was another one of those, Mormons are good people and they've got so much energy towards good causes. But what if I could redirect that cause towards things I like? Sort of the L.E. Medecet sort of attitude.
Don't we all do that to some extent?
From different perspectives and from different places within the culture. And like if I'm allowed to make a personal attack on Brother Cannon, could I slander you over the internet briefly?
If it's true, and then it's not
true.
Slander.
So I was preparing for this the other night by reading through some of your online statements. You talked about how you don't drink alcohol because it's a terrible thing, but you don't drink tea or coffee because you want solidarity with your faith community. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you believe God wants you to drink? Do you believe God wants you to miss the tea and the coffee? Do you believe he wants you to not drink tea and coffee?
To express my solidarity with my community, yes.
But like you personally, that he would rather, so you want to qualify it?
I'm not qualifying it any more than I just said it.
Okay.
I think that's why I don't do it. And that's the inspiration that I feel behind it.
And so which of these is more strong? Because you want to be in solidarity with your faith community, or because you want to please God?
When I'm in the service of my fellow men, I'm only in the service of my God. Straight from the Book of Mormon, right?
I think we can all take our own interpretations of that answer. All right.
But that is right from the Book of Mormon, right?
Well, yes, but I would apply it a little bit differently, but I don't want to take up all our time on that.
I just want people to know who are watching this that you agree that I'm quoting scripture for that.
Everybody quotes scripture.
Okay, if you were to act like I'm not, people might doubt it because they don't know.
Well, I think many of your I guess verbal mannerisms, a lot of the influence you draw seems to be, I guess, things that might convince people that you're really looking at this from a secular perspective.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. It's a mistake, however. My transhumanism was the fruits of my Mormonism, not the other way around.
Right. But a lot of us are just scared it's going to turn into post-Mormonism.
Well, it actually brought me back to faith. I had lost my faith. I was becoming estranged from the church. Now I'm very practicing, have been for many years now. Mm-hmm. And I'm currently a teacher for my elders quorum. I was just released during the pandemic from being Sunday school president. Sure. My second son is serving a mission. My oldest one already did. My wife teaches at the MTC. We're very practicing Mormons.
Okay. That was just one contention I had from reading your stuff is that, and of course that's the contention I posted in 2017. You say Deznat harasses people. I remember posting a couple things about the MTA on Twitter, and I didn't follow any of you guys, but all of a sudden I had Lincoln Cannon in my mentions, asking me what did you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
Oh, I don't think that's harassment if you're just asking me questions.
I was flattered by that. Well, often we will ask people questions on the internet and be called harassers because language is a very powerful weapon.
That's unfair. If that's what I had seen, I wouldn't have said what I said. But I've seen, and I don't know who it was.
Have you seen me harassing people?
I don't know, Jesse. I honestly don't know who it was.
So I would prefer that you don't paint me with such a broad brush and distance yourself so knee-jerk from me on the basis of other people's actions. Is that fair?
That's fair. Okay. That's fair. At the same time, will you acknowledge that people using the Deznat identity do engage in overt harassment on Twitter? If you can't acknowledge that, we're on very, very different pages because it seems.
Well, I mean, you're asking me to pull from some information I probably don't have.
Well, didn't
Weekly Haas I block a lot of cringe posters. I don't see everything that goes on.
But didn't Weekly Haas just confirm? Weekly Haas, didn't you just confirm that you may harass people?
Or no, I don't harass people.
I may have muted Haas. I don't know. Sorry, Haas.
Oh, hey. I'm friend to all. Yes. I do not harass anyone I want.
We are a hashtag of peace.
Yeah. Deznat means I love you. And
yes, so right.
And so anyone who feels harassed is probably just kind of cringe anyway. So
wait, Tuyami, you said something?
Says the dude with a face mask on.
I wanted to say, speaking of harassment, I just wanted to know where Jules is because I think he would fit in really well with all this Mormon talk, considering Mormons are polyamorous.
We're gonna get to that, but no, Jules is not
available.
That's a bit
complicated.
I wish Jules was here. Maybe Jules is gonna be in the chat. Jules is unfortunately unable to make it. At least
the word
right
is
now.
polygynous.
Polygynous.
That's actually not entirely true. I just want to make fun of Jules for being a cuck. Joseph Smith made that more complicated.
So when it comes to like the Mexican Mormons, do they have multiple wives or no? Like the Romneys and the LeBarons.
LeBarons are a break-off sect. And I think they may practice some of that. There was actually, if you're interested in crazy stories from our faith, there was this a guy named Ervil LeBaron was on a mission in France in the 50s who converted most of his mission to polygamy and came home and married a couple of the sister missionaries from his place. A very lurid story. There's some decent write-ups. Sunstone has a pretty good article on that. But yeah, there's polygamy as such is not practiced during life by members of our church. Although
it would be a lot cooler if it was, though.
Yeah, why not?
A lot of guys have ghost wives. It's true. A lot of guys are sealed to women who are not alive.
Wives? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Brigham Young, he had a lot of wives, but from what I understand, it was women who were widows. Their husbands died, and he was like taking care of them.
No,
not in all cases. Life.
But what was it that stopped polygamy from being a modern
United States government?
The U.S. government, yeah.
It's always feds.
Gotcha.
That and also the church made the decision to end it as well.
Right. After hiding it for 20 years.
Government.
So, Jesse, getting back to the not being Abrahamic, can you expand on that as far as the lineage of the faith goes?
I said God is not from the Abrahamic tradition. Abraham didn't create him. We take a lot of our beliefs from him from the Abrahamic tradition, but he was there before, and he was there in a very different form, and we see hints of that, of the different ways of perceiving God, even within the Hebrew Scriptures, talking about God dwelling within the deep darkness, which is something that many modern Christians don't really feel comfortable with, but God and the heavenly council and whatever beings he uses, whether they're human like us, are going to or have had human bodies, or whether they're snake people or whatever.
Nagas.
That's whatever it is. That's what it is. Oh, nice, Hoss. But I don't think any of the Latter-day Saints in this conversation want to let ourselves be bound solely by one tradition like that. And I would argue that the Latter-day Saint tradition has expanded past a lot of the tropes of Abrahamism. I mean, we explicitly invite all truth, and that includes truth from other theologies. That means we're better than the other theologies. Sorry, Lincoln. We're better than they are. We have more truth, and we have more access to truth. Other theologies
I'm a Mormon,
make you more
Jesse.
or less vulnerable to evil spirits telling you to kill your neighbor. We're the ones who have the good spirits telling you to kill your neighbor. Book of Mormon starts with a murder. Just saying that. Sorry.
Wait, Sonny, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So what you're saying is really interesting to me right now. I just want to know if you would say that Mormonism is compatible with other faiths, like paganism or Vedism or Taoism. Like, can you see Jesus Christ as like the Tao by the way that you're explaining it, or like other or all of the gods in the Rig Vedic tradition as reflections of God? Like, are there truths that come from these things, like in the Hermetic tradition and the Orphic tradition? Like, I'm wondering, because I don't like Abrahamic like faiths, but what you're saying is like vibing with me. So,
well, the Amida Buddha. Do you see any parallels between Jesus and the Amida Buddha?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Those traditions, I believe that they have a much longer history than anyone wants to give them.
Yeah.
And the Vedas, the Katha Upanishad. You remember when Nachiketas asks for the fire ceremony to get to heaven. And we hold an endowment ceremony in our temples that's meant to enter you into the fires of heaven. And all these things are very connected. We use a particular aesthetic because just for, I guess, administrative reasons almost. There's a lot of what goes on in our churches that's very similar to 19th century Methodism and a lot that we've kind of cross-pollinated from other Christian denominations of our day. But at our core, we are still very, very strange. I don't want anyone to forget that.
Interesting.
I have a black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu, and so I'm very familiar with Taoism, Chan Buddhism, and so yeah, a lot of parallels we could get into.
It's also interesting to think that the Jews, they were in Babylon for a long time, where they were exposed to Zoroastrianism, which I think resonates a lot with this idea of having an individual will power to decide whether to go on the side of good and evil, as opposed to like a collective punishment that God would bring about. So that's a very interesting thing for me to look at, like what are the other sources that must have figured into the creation of the Torah over time, and then the New Testament and all that. Even something like baptism. This was something that I read from Rupert Sheldrake, who we had on the National Arts Club. He was talking about how earlier baptisms, the way he looks at it, may have been ways of getting people under the water for such a long amount of time that they lost consciousness and they went into some other realm, and then they came back, while today it's just sprinkling with the water. So it's always interesting for me to look back at what were some mystery school practices that people ended up losing, and maybe that's why a lot of people today who, let's say, they're not part of a community, they don't participate in any of these mystery school practices, no wonder they feel so fucking miserable. Where back then, like in ancient Rome, for example, you would have people, slaves and not slaves, who would participate in all these various mystery traditions. They would feel as if they died and came back from the dead, and it would be something to give them a higher grasp of reality. And it's like, if
sometimes they did come back from the dead. Sorry.
No, that's an interesting point. Like, we have lost all this information, and right now it seems like the only people who really care about it are, few and far between, or are people who are much more organized, like Bohemian Grove and all that stuff. And again, I have no idea how much of that stuff they just do for fun, for shits and giggles, and how much is it actually serious occult technology that they're utilizing.
And that's I suppose was part of my contention with the Mormon Transhumanist Association in 2017, and there was a discussion about that on my now defunct blog, and most of the discussion centered around morality, but I feel like the technology that the Mormon Transhumanists are seeking to try to copy miracles and approach God, which is a noble goal. To achieve human resurrection in our time which is a noble goal. We seek technologies that descend pretty much from the Royal Society of England in the 1600s, without very much interest or even belief in these other things. If this were the 60s, in the 60s there was a lot of interest in the Latter-day Saint and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from occultists and spiritualists and hippies of all kinds, because of our wonderful space doctrine, and many were able to syncretize their let's say counterculture kinds of faiths with our doctrine. And this happened, of course, in the 19th century with spiritualists, and I feel like it's a mistake to leave out this aspect. I guess I would say that if the Mormon Transhumanist Association asked me for an improvement, I would tell them to get a secret handshake and an initiation rite.
We have them in our temples.
But does your organization have one?
Well, 75% of the members of the Mormon Transhumanist Association are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's a strong feeling among most Mormon transhumanists, not all for sure. There's disagreement with some, but most members of the association don't want to be perceived as competing with the church. They want to be perceived as complementing the church. That this is
sucks that they are anyway.
Say again.
It's kind of lame that they are anyway.
Lame that what?
That you are perceived as competing with the church anyway.
I mean, yeah, some people do.
If you're going to be, you might as well get the. Anyway, I'm much more interested in the ancient aliens. Sorry.
Well, when it comes to going back to Bohemian Grove for a second, we got a comment from De Facto saying, y'all really just going to ignore that Hillary said that she was sacrificing chickens to Moloch in the leaked emails, though? And like I always say, Moloch, mo problems.
The Book of Mormon, one of the major themes of the Book of Mormon is evil secret societies and their effect on a government. They're called the Gadiantons, and so if you see us use the word Gadianton, we're referring to evil secret societies. They're set up for their own power and gain. They work horrible works of darkness, which aren't described, but probably involve torturing animals for adrenochrome. And then in the later part of the Book of Mormon, these secret societies become so powerful that armies can't even dislodge them from their hideouts in the wilderness. Their effect on society is that everyone hates what's going on, but no one can do anything about it. No one wants to be involved. And their society gets worse and worse until it completely collapses. The Gadiantons destroy their government, and no one wants to put it back together. They all hate each other, but they hate the Gadiantons worse, which I think is a pretty interesting. I mean, even from a literary perspective. Of course, what happens after that, before we see what that could turn into. The resurrected Jesus Christ destroys several Nephite cities and completely obliterates their civilization for a little while. So that's another important perspective to take in the righteousness of our society, in how much we tolerate opposing views, is that there is a very strong risk when we tolerate Gadiantons, when we tolerate our elites doing Bohemian Grove stuff, that we will be obliterated by heaven.
By the way, Lincoln, you have to go soon, but I wanted to use this time for Cowboy, since you first came in here. If you have anything you want to ask Lincoln, now would be a good time.
Yeah, like the transhumanist Mormon Transhumanist organization. You guys do like a lot of stuff on the science, like programming side, right? Like you guys have like actual time and money invested in technology, or am I like wrong about that? I don't really know.
Most of the founders of the Mormon Transhumanist Association were software engineers, and there's a high number of software engineers among our membership today.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've read a little bit about you guys, but I've always been fascinated with some of the interesting connections between Mormonism and Scythian / Rigvedic civilization, because you guys, I'm not sure if this is still a Mormon practice today, but I remember reading somewhere that instead of coffee or caffeine, Mormons drank Mormon tea, which is from ephedra, and that's actually one of the historical components of the Soma back in Eurasia. So that's pretty interesting stuff, man.
Less common today, but you still find it in some families.
Mormonism does have an interesting relationship with herbs of all kinds going back historically. There are some Mormon scholars who have even made the case that Joseph Smith used entheogens in temple ceremonies in our early history. That's a controversial claim, but they make a case for it.
Yeah, that's extremely fascinating. I guess the only other question I had is that in one of the videos of is it the leader of the Mormon Church called the president, or is he? I can't remember his title, but he was speaking.
He has multiple titles, including president.
Yeah, he was speaking in a video on Easter where he showed this really interesting kind of like cubist or futurist art of Jesus and these people on the boat, and it just reminded me of like 1930s futurist art, and I just thought that was so cool. And is that like a style you see in a lot of Mormon art these days, or is that just like a one-off thing?
I haven't seen it a lot. I'd be happy to see more of it. The president of our church right now is I was going to say former heart surgeon, but I don't know if you ever become a former one. He might still be able to do it, but yeah, he has a background in medical science, so some influence from that angle there for him. That's
fascinating stuff, man. I'm gonna look more into it. But if you got to get going, have a good day, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Lincoln. Oh,
that artist.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Lincoln.
Hey, Jesse, I want to say in particular to you that I've been highly pleased with having this conversation with you today.
And likewise, I'm very impressed.
I anticipated something different from you than what I received, and I want to apologize in part for that. In part because I think there are some things that maybe you would admit lead me to the perception that I had, but not of you personally. And you actually contradicted my personal anticipation of you. And I'm sorry. I should have been less judgmental of you. Thank you.
No problem, man. No problem.
Well, have a good one, all. Thank you for the invitation, Lev.
You're welcome. Well, this is what we do. This is what the BTR stream does. It brings people together like this so they can have conversations, and sometimes they clash, sometimes they come together. So, I mean, like it said, blessed are the peacemakers. So, I'm going to try to make as much peace within this chaotic time as possible among the people that I bring onto the stream. So, Lincoln Cannon, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great pleasure to have you on. And also, reminder again for everybody who's watching this, daily reminder, subscribe, send this to your friends. You see how good of a stream we put on here. We want to keep doing this. We want to keep growing, and we definitely will keep growing with your help. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching.